Hi everybody, so in this video I would like to show you and share with you some thoughts and review of the Tarot de Marseille Edition Millennium, the Millennium Edition, Tarot de Marseille Millennium Edition, or as I call it for myself, the 21st Century Tarot of Marseille, the 21st Century Tarot de Marseille, or TDM. Now, the term Tarot de Marseille is still kind of contested, I think. Even as we speak, people are still debating as to what is really Tarot de Marseille, because a lot of these TDMs aren't even from Marseille. And so, I've mentioned or sort of briefly shared with you the term TDM and how it came about, because Grimoire published, I think it was the Conver, and from the 1700s, and marketed it, titled it The Ancient Tarot of Marseille. And after that, decks such as the Conver are called Marseille, even though they're from Avignon, they're from Paris, they're from Lyon, they're from all over France, and they're all called Marseille, which is a city in France. It's a bit like calling a Scottish person or an Irish person or a Welsh person English, which, shock and horror, I once did, and I was promptly corrected. And they say even though we are part of the UK, we are not English, we are Scottish. And I thought, isn't that the same thing? And they say, no, it's not. So I suppose it is understandable that it is quite confusing when people say, well, it's from Lyon, it's not from Marseille, why are we calling it Marseille? So I suppose these days we agree that Marseille is a type of, or Tarot de Marseille, not Marseille. Marseille is a city in France. One of the oldest and biggest card making city, I suppose, in France, if I remember correctly, is Marseille indeed. Where was I? Tarot de Marseille, that's right. And so this is like the 21st century version, this 21st century, or should I say, this is not the 21st century version of Tarot de Marseille, but this is Tarot de Marseille for the 21st century. And by that, I can share with you two things. The first is the creator's own point of view. The creator's own point of view is that he is restoring a sacred geometry principle in the designs of these cards that have disappeared in the late 1700s. So it's originally there, and then it's disappeared, and now he's rediscovered it. Now you can, before I go through the cards, let me show you this one here. So this is the box, like so. And in here is the French blurb. On the other side is the English blurb. And if you notice here, three words: restoration of the 78 arcanas of the Marseille Tarot based on the rediscovery of their original sacred geometry. So restoration, rediscovery, original, very clearly expressed sort of a framework or a proposition that there was something there that was lost and he discovered it or rediscovered it. I personally would like very much, and I personally have actually taken this deck as the best of all of the Marseille decks that are the foundation of modern Tarot de Marseille patterns, or the foundation of what we now term Tarot de Marseille. And this means Chanson, Madenier, Conver, which is also known as the Type 2 according to Theory de Paulis's sort of framework. And the Type 2 Tarot de Marseille is indeed the foundation of our modern understanding of Tarot de Marseille. And so for me, I I really, really like this. And before I go on, I'm just gonna get this out of the way. This is 2 thumbs up for me, and I highly recommend this for beginners who are looking for their first Tarot de Marseille deck. In the past, I have recommended the Conver Bendorf, which is the Joaf Bendorf's version of the Conver deck, which, as I've mentioned in my other video, is the foundation of modern TDM. And the reason why I think this is a contender for beginners to start off their TDM collection or their TDM journey is because this is the perfect, almost like the perfect sampler, the best of. If you're buying an album from a group of musicians, and instead of buying 10 albums, you can buy the best of, and then after that you can decide which of their albums you might prefer the best, or which of their albums you might prefer to go into exploring further. So for me personally, I am a skeptic, and so in my own mind, I doubt very much that the kind of deck that Tarot de Marseille, or the kind of decks that these decks were in the 1600s, in the 1700s, and in the 1800s, these are mass-produced, highly churned out, cheaply done, fastly done, widely available type of playing cards. I doubt it very much that there was ever a situation or a condition where someone is granted or can afford the time and the money to contemplate the images, to tweak the images, and to really formulate the images. In my opinion, at least at the moment, I think these are simply a typical mass-produced cultural artifact. So before I continue, the usual way with the Two of Coins, Wilfried Houdouin, the creator, he and Yves Renaud are based on Marseille. Yves Renaud is the person behind Tarot of Marseille Heritage, tarotdemarseilleheritage.com, which produce a variety of reproductions of old decks, and then 2017. And so going back to my own take on things, I doubt very much that in such an environment there is ever a time when a wood block is carved ever so carefully, you know, where someone actually I mean, it's possible, and that's the beauty of this deck. It made me wonder of the possibility of a time when, given all the right circumstances, given all the stars are aligning with all the time and all the funding and all the resources in the world, would a block carver, would a block print carver not create something as beautiful as this? And the question is, did they ever? And I suppose Wilfried Houdouin's answer to that is that yes. My own inclination at the moment is no, it is unlikely that there was ever such a time. However, this deck makes me wonder if somewhere in time there wasn't a person or two or three who have imagined Tarot de Marseille exactly how Wilfried Houdouin have created it. And that filled me with delight, with imagination, with inspiration, with what some would term magical thinking, with some would term this idea of myth making to be a portal to higher truths, and like a bit like art and poetry. How poetry is a window to this deeper truth that no recounting of facts could ever achieve. If you have ever heard of E.E. Cummings' poem, what was it called again? It was stuck in my mind. Something about, I have to read it out to you. Hold on a second. This is a poem by E.E. Cummings called Somewhere I Have Never Traveled Gladly Beyond. That's the title. Bear with me here. I have a point, I promise. Somewhere I have never traveled gladly beyond. Any experience, your eyes have their silence. In your most frail gesture are things which enclose me, or which I cannot touch because they are too near. Your slightest look easily will unclose me, though I have closed myself as fingers. You open always petal by petal myself as spring opens, touching skillfully, mysteriously her first rose. Or if you wish, be too close me, I and my life will shut very beautifully suddenly, as when the heart of this flower imagines the snow carefully everywhere descending. Nothing which we are to perceive in this world equals the power of your intense fragility, whose texture compels me with the color of its countries, rendering death and forever with each breathing. I do not know what it is about you that closes and opens. Only something in me understands. The voice of your eyes is deeper than all roses. Nobody, not even the rain, has such small hands. Now, do you understand any of that? I didn't, but somewhere in me, I felt like someone is telling me the truth in a way that I have never been able to see the truth, or a truth. And this is how I know I'm probably sounding a little nuts at the moment, but it feels like Enrique Enriquez, both Enrique Enriquez in Eclectic Tarot before it was closed, and this was posted several years ago, and I chanced upon his post commenting on this deck as the original that Conver and Chasson and Medenier and all those guys from the 16, 17, 1800s, whatever, from several hundred years ago have in fact copied. And so of course there is a poetic license there when he said that, those guys from several hundred years ago was copying Tarot Millennium by Wilfried Houdouin, which was created in 2017. In that this is Tarot de Marseille as it could have been. This is Tarot de Marseille as it should have been. And at least to me, now whether this is the Tarot de Marseille that once was, as as he proposes, I don't know about that, at least not for me. But I think for me, the fact that that isn't an established fact in my mind is what create the magic for me in this deck. And the color is crisp, the cardstock is absolutely matte. There's a little bit of patches of micro shiny patches along this area here, as if the matte lamination have been scuffed a little bit during shuffling. And the fact that you really can't see this under the current light, and the fact that you really need natural light to see it, shows that it really doesn't matter, really. And so this cardstock is beautiful, and it reminds me of Jean-Claude Froino's redrawing of various historical decks, the Dodal, the Noblet, those are type 1. Now this seems to be a cumulative best of the best of type 2. If you see the staff of the Pope here is the triple cross, Cupid's not blindfolded, the curtain rather than the scallop pattern atop the chariot, the hangman doesn't have his tongue sticking out, there's no finger-like rendition around his shoulders there. But the devil here has a face on its belly, very much like type 1 instead of type 2, and so that's interesting to me. So perhaps someone mentioned the quality of the fire here, but it's not mentioned in the historical write-ups that I saw so far, so we don't know whether the tower is one of those ones that's different between type 1 and type 2 consistently across the board. This is all the best features, all the best possible. It's a compilation of the best of type 2 TDM basically into this one deck, and so that's why I would highly recommend this for those of you who are starting their journey with TDM and looking for the first deck, after which perhaps you could decide that perhaps you would prefer to go into the Conver specifically, or the Chanson specifically, or the Noblesse specifically. I also would like to note that I read very much like Enrique Enriquez and Camelia Elias. I'm not saying I read the way they do, I don't follow their school of thoughts, but I do free flow, what do you call it? I don't know what it's called. I will give you a sample. I posted a couple of videos as to how I read, and so you can find that either down below, up here in the eye, or at the end of this video. And so for me, differences in little lines over here or little lines over there doesn't really matter. Now there are reading styles which demand very specific. Oh, there's the scuffing there, as you can see. Okay, where is it? There. So it's just little scuffing like that, or sort of patches of shiny patches across the otherwise matte lamination there. So the way you read, and I read, first of all, I read majors only. Second of all, I read free flow. And so to me, the minute differences in terms of lines and colors doesn't make much of a difference. However, the reading school that you follow may or may not make this an ideal choice for you. However, I feel that if you're a beginner, the best of all type 2 TDM is, I can't see how that would be unproductive. And so again, 2 thumbs up from me. And if you are looking for your first TDM deck, or you're just starting your journey with TDM, by no means I am going to say that this is the only TDM deck you ever need, but I think as a first deck, this personally, if this was around when I started my journey 4 years ago, I probably would have picked this instead of Conver Bend Off. Having said that, I think Conver Bend Off is a brilliant deck. I stand by that. But this is, I feel it's truly unique, and it shuffles beautifully. I don't riffle shuffle this because I like the feel of overhand shuffling with this kind of thick cardstock, and with all this very swishy sound, and very lovely. Okay, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.